The Shark Deck.
I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Stand Up for Heroes will be back for its 17th year. The annual benefit is returning November 6th at Dave and Geffen Hall. I was like, where's that? I'm from New York. I don't even know where that is. Lincoln Center. The lineup this year, Jimmy Carr, awesome. Ronny Chieng, Shane Gillis, Josh Groban, John Mellencamp listed. John was in a little social media hot water last week. Should we go there? All right, I guess we're there. From the New York Post, let me read verbatim. Liberal comedian Bill Maher got into a tense exchange with musician John Mellencamp on Monday last week after the Pink House's singer-songwriter claimed only 1% or 2% of black people living in America today have better lives than slaves. During an appearance on Maher's Club Random podcast, Mellencamp revealed he wrote a song called From the Cotton Field to the Playing Fields that he never recorded because he believed it was wrong. The song's message was an attempt to show how white people love to hate black entertainers and often exploit them. 29 minutes into the interview, Moore said, I would say that the playing fields are a lot better than the cotton fields. That's what I'd say about that. Maybe I'm crazy, John, but it seems like making no money as a slave picking cotton. It was not as good as playing left field for the Yankees. The Post writes, as Maher attempted to continue his argument, Mellencamp interjected and said, there's no doubt 1 or 2% of black people in America have a better life. Maher said, oh, stop. That's what you think? 1 or 2%? Mellencamp said, okay, let's say 10%. I just pulled a number out of my ass. Maher then told Mellencamp that's where his opinion belongs. It was a feisty week over in Bill Maher land. Anyway, your lineup, Jimmy Carr, yay, Ronny Chieng, Shane Gillis, Josh Groban, John Mellencamp, Tracy Morgan, Jon Stewart, The War and Treaty, Rita Wilson, and more. Bob Woodruff said, I'm thrilled to announce the 17th annual Stand Up for Heroes, an amazing night of hope, healing, and laughter to honor our nation's veterans and their families. Today is September 11th. I've put together a bunch of stories here related to 9/11 and comedy. I found some really very fascinating anecdotes, including a George Carlin story that I'll share. I just want to tell you that's what the next big chunk of the show until the commercial break is going to be. So, if this is something that you just don't want to go there today, I'm from New York City. I was in New York City on 9/11. Totally get it. And I'll tell you, even as I was putting this together, a lot of the articles had pictures of the towers on fire. And yeah, it brought me back to that place. So just want to let you know that that's what I'm going to do here. All right. From Vulture, a few years back, they had a compilation of comedians talking about how they reacted to 9/11. So I pulled a couple of those stories out. One from Mitzi Shore, who owned the Comedy Store. Ahmed told the story that Mitzi made him a paid regular a year prior to 9/11 because, quote, she had an epiphany that Middle Eastern comedians will be necessary in our society at some point. She'd always tell me there's going to be a war between America and the Middle East, so get ready. I called her the morning of 9/11 and said, are you seeing what's going on? And she replied, I told you so. Mitzi decided to open the Comedy Store the Friday after 9/11 and requested for me to go on stage, open the show, and talk about being Middle Eastern and Muslim, to which I replied, nope. I didn't know what to talk about, and she said, just be yourself, and you'll know what to say. Ahmed took her advice and said his first joke was, hi, everyone, my name's Ahmed, and I had nothing to do with it. Please don't follow me out to my car after the show. He says that got a few chuckles, and then he proceeded into more self-deprecating jokes, and the crowd loosened up. About a month later, he was touring with Maz Jobrani and the Arabian Nights. That tour evolved into the Axis of Evil tour, which was just a great name for a tour. His manager called and said, you guys are getting death threats. It's probably not a good idea to continue with the shows. Ahmed called Maz, and they both laughed and said, well, if we're going to die laughing. So they did the shows, which were all sold out. Maz said he flipped his act, so it didn't lead with being Iranian. Quoting Maz, at one point I said, oh, by the way, I'm Iranian, and then said something along the lines of, yeah, I know, I'm disappointed too. I remember I brought an American flag and put it on the back of my car. I don't know if it was out of fear of having somebody shoot me or if it was just out of patriotism. It was probably out of both. I was pulling into the parking lot at the Comedy Store, and there was this comedian, Marilyn Martinez. She was just laughing at me in a funny way. She was like, oh my God, look at Maz Jobrani. He's got his flag trying to blend in. And I go, hell yeah, Marilyn, I'm blending in. Alonzo Bowden said, I remember Vegas being empty and deserted. I think they said the normal weekend occupancy was over 90%, and we were under 25%. I joked that Vegas was so empty that the hookers were handing out their own flyers. I was also joking at the time that we black people were glad it was the Arabs because it took the pressure off for a while. I didn't do jokes about the attack. I joked more about the aftermath. The crowds loved it. They always do. We comics relieved the pressure. People were angry. I won Next Big Star, so that was cool. I also remember flying about 2 weeks later after the airline started up. I ran into Doug Stanhope at the airport around 5 or 6 a.m., and we laughed about how only comics were getting on planes, which brings us to Gilbert Gottfried's infamous performance about 2 weeks after 9/11. A few minutes into his set, Gilbert cracked the joke, I have to catch a flight to California. I can't get a direct flight. They said they have to stop at the Empire State Building first. Gilbert later recalled that he lost an audience bigger than anyone has ever lost an audience. Gilbert told Vulture, "Now, if there's something that should not be said, I like to say it. And I'm standing at the podium, and I wanted to be the first one to address the elephant in the room. So after a few jokes about Hugh Hefner, I said," the joke I just shared with you, "well, no one in the history of show business has ever lost an audience worse. There was booing and hissing. One guy yelled out, 'Too soon!' which I thought meant I didn't take a long enough pause between the setup and the punchline. Well, after standing there for what felt like 500 years, I decided to go to the bottom level of hell. I told the aristocrats joke. If you know anything about that joke, it's beyond offensive. It has to do with loads of incest and bestiality, and those are the clean parts. To my shock, the audience went from brewing and hating me to laughing uproariously. The laughter just kept building. When I got to the punchline, people were cheering. One review said, 'It's like he performed a mass tracheotomy on the crowd.' What that show proved to me is that after horrible times like September 11th, people desperately needed to laugh." Dina Obadiah was a young comic in 2001. He's currently out on the Arab American Comedy Festival tour. He remembers changing his name for some shows post 9/11 at the suggestion of a booker and consciously avoiding talking about the Palestinian side of his ethnicity. He's also part Italian. Some of the material he does at this year's festival deals with his personal arc post 9/11. As he became more defiant of the bigotry thrown his way, he says, "When it became political, then it became of interest to me. The idea of using a vehicle like comedy to try to tell people our story and who we are has always appealed." The Arab American Comedy Festival will come to New York. They're at Gotham November 16th through the 18th and New York City's Town Hall November 19th. And I found this wonderful story from 2016 from The New Yorker. I knew some of this, but not all of this, and it's really interesting. The New Yorker writes, "On the nights of September 9th and 10th, 2001, George Carlin performed shows at the MGM Grand Casino in Las Vegas, working through material that he planned to use at the taping of his next HBO special that November. The special was going to be called I Kinda Like It When a Lot of People Die. After 9/11, Carlin abandoned much of the hour he'd been working on. He rewrote other parts, and that special became Complaints and Grievances. However, they eventually found some recordings of those shows. Those were eventually reworked, and eventually in 2016, I Kinda Like It When a Lot of People Die was released as an album of sorts. The track listings on that album: Boston Ran from 1957, Rats and Squealers, Cocaine, The Fecal Differential, Tired of Songs, The First Enema, Uncle Dave, an interview with Jerry Hamza, his manager, an interview with a guy named Rocco Urbisky, I'm not familiar with, and then the track I Kinda Like It When a Lot of People Die, recorded on June 23rd of 2001. But as for those shows on September 9th and 10th, the New Yorker writes, "The most striking thing about the show," listen to this is amazing, "is that Carlin made a joke about Osama bin Laden and an exploding airplane." They write, "In fashion typical of the comedian, it started as a fart joke. Quote, these planes get flying so fast that the most vicious, lethal, volatile, flammable, unstable farts get pushed toward the back of the airplane, where they begin to build up pressure, and they build and they build and they build until they reach critical fart density, CFD, and they continue to build throughout the flight until some kid turns on a Game Boy and boom, the whole back of the plane blows off, and you know who gets blamed? Osama bin Laden. Terrorists get blamed for those explosions that are nothing more than cabbage fart detonations." Again, September 9th and 10th, 2001. Wow. Carlin then goes into an extended riff, one that he'd repurpose on the 2006 special Life is Worth Losing, about a broken water main in Los Angeles, setting off a cascading series of increasingly gruesome disasters across the country. That is a wonderful bit if you've never heard it. Carlin says, "I know some people think these kind of thoughts are ghoulish and demented and sick, but I know they're not. I know these things are normal and quite common. Society's told you that nice people don't take pleasure in mass death, but you're wrong, because I think mass death is terrific, and I'm a really nice effing guy. The only thing I care about is fun, that's all, entertainment." By the time of his HBO special that November, he'd given up most of the death-obsessed bits, but he didn't ignore 9/11 completely. He told members of the audience that he had to bring it up to get it out of the way, because, and then he did that voice he would do, "Otherwise, the terrorists win." Switching gears, and this is a lot more fun. The Australians are mad at Shane Gillis. The Daily Mail writing wonderfully, "A comedian hailing from the United States has been called out by Australians after his bizarre claim that the country is doing nothing and has zero exports." There's a clip that's gone viral. You can find it on the Daily Mail site, and this is from Shane Gillis' new special. Shane says, "Australia's good. Australia might be number 2. That's a good country, dude. It's just a whole country doing nothing. That's what I like about them. They're just down there. Zero exports, creating nothing, dude. The only export I've seen coming out of Australia is that YouTube video of the guy punching that kangaroo in the face. The Daily Mail writes, Australia does in fact have many exports. They include iron ore, coal, natural gas, gold, agricultural products like beef and wheat, and minerals such as aluminum and copper. Our university system, which attracts students from around the world, is also considered an export because it brings in money from overseas. Australia is also responsible for many inventions and innovations that shape the modern world, including Wi-Fi, the black box flight recorder, hearing aids, the polymer banknote, the HPV vaccine, and the ultrasound scanner. One Aussie responded on social media, Australia might be number 2. Pretty bold from someone who lives in a country without free ambulance usage, free hospital coverage, 4 weeks of sick leave, and of course, the fact that we can send our children to school without fearing that they'll be mass murdered. Yikes. John, you can't go into the commercials after that school children line and after 10 minutes about 9/11. Do you have anything upbeat to break the ice here? Okay, let me move a story up. Trevor Noah has a new book coming out. It's called Into the Uncut Grass. Trevor said, few memories in my life bring me more joy than the first few books I read as a child, either with my mom or reading alone. Those simple stories shaped so much of how I saw the world. I hope this story can bring a little bit of that same joy to readers of all ages. Into the Uncut Grass is a moving modern fable about forgiveness, acceptance, and solidarity for readers of all ages. From The Hollywood Reporter, Adam Sandler's most recent movie, You Are So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah, my wife liked it, by the way. I didn't watch it. Has managed to draw a higher Rotten Tomatoes score than any of Adam Sandler's previous films over the last 34 years. You Are So Not Invited has a 96% fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes. New story here, totally changing topics. This has nothing to do with that Adam Sandler story I just told you. Congratulations, Adam Sandler. But there's a story going around in Vulture. Apparently, a PR company has been accused of paying off critics for Rotten Tomatoes reviews. Yeah. Vulture wrote an article called The Decomposition of Rotten Tomatoes, claims that a particular company manipulated the Rotten Tomatoes score for a movie that had nothing to do with Adam Sandler. But it seems there's a thing going on where maybe some movies are possibly, who knows, getting reviews that, maybe are a little better than the movie actually has. Again, this has nothing to do with Adam Sandler. Let's be clear. You Were So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah. Fantastic film. 96% fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes. What else can I tell you about? Let's see. Football, Monday Night Football. Peyton Manning's Omaha Productions did a gag that got a lot of promotion, suggesting that Peyton and Eli were going to add a third host to their little Monday Night Football additional alternate telecast, is the word I'm fishing for there. They showed 35 people auditioning for the third seat. Some of them included comedians like Will Arnett and Sarah Silverman. The 800-pound gorilla has released a special. It's called Tori Piskin, Prettiest Girl at the Special School, filmed at the Brooklyn Comedy Club. The set begins with Piskin on stage with family photos. Piskin is immediately animated, lands a joke, and begins to do impressions of the people who populated her world. A small impression of Frank, her boyfriend at school, leads quickly to the lines, "We had no idea what Frank's disability was, I think just from Staten Island." She then does an impression of her mother. The portrayal situates her mother as a Jewish New Yorker who is of a certain generation that prioritize suspicion, caution, and these near imperceptible characteristics help bring it to life in the best way possible. Piskin's mother's able to play dumb when maybe claiming she slept with someone besides her husband, be critical of men her daughter dates, and be both self-congratulatory and untrusting when describing the principal as a big druggie because he doesn't tailor his pants. You'll find that on the 800-pound gorilla website or their YouTube, Tori Piskin, Prettiest Girl at the Special School. And that's your comedy news for today. Thanks to DraftKings for supporting today's show. Follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your shows. See you tomorrow.